So many times, uh, Revelation speaks of wrath and judgment and death and loss of life, disaster. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just all this tragic stuff. And because people don't want to, because that's an uncomfortable topic, people don't want to even like consider that. And so it's easier just to kind of just plead ignorance and just because we know ignorance, or the phrase term is ignorance is bliss, and because I don't know any better, and that's just my excuse, and I'm content there. But at some point, as maturing believers, if we truly want to mature, there comes a point in time that we have to face even the difficult topics, the difficult situations. I can't ever remember growing any when things were easy. I always grew when things got difficult and when I'm faced with challenges. And so anyway, tonight we're going to go into chapter 5, Revelation chapter 5, but just a quick review of chapter 4. Just real quick review. Remember, I cued you guys in on verse 1. After these things, John said, I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. And then it goes on, and at the end of the verse it said, I will show you the things which must be after these things. So from that we understand the pre-tribulation rapture, meaning prior to any tribulation coming upon the earth, the church is raptured or caught away, harpazo, caught away up into heaven. And chapters 4 and 5 really kind of, if chapter 1's kind of write the things which thou hast seen, is chapter 1. Write the things which are, chapters 2 and 3. And then which shall be hereafter, 4 and 5. And chapters 4, really chapters 4 through 19, but chapters 4 and 5 give us the viewpoint or the vantage point from heaven. Tonight's going to be interesting as we go into chapter 5, and we'll get in. Next week we'll open up with chapter 6 and talk about the seals and all that. But really I want to kind of lay some foundation for what the seals even are, the seal judgments, and so we'll talk about that. So Revelation chapter 5, verse 1. The events of chapter 5 immediately follow the happenings that we saw last week in chapter 4. There's this glorious buildup of divine judgment about to strike the earth. So there's this tension, and I'm not talking like an eerie tension, but something's up, and you can sense that. And we know in chapter 4 there we saw who was gathered and worship taking place before the throne. We talked about the strength and the symbolism of the throne, that it's a place, it's not just a seat to sit down and rest in, but it's a place of divine rule. And then we're going to get a picture here of the one, or we did get a picture of the one who is about to take back what is rightfully his. Now John says right here in verse 1 of chapter 5, and I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals, or scroll. Sometimes that translates out to scroll. I read in something I was studying that sometimes those scrolls will be pieced together till they're 20 feet long when they're unwound, So, but we'll talk about what the scroll is. The words I saw stress John's status as an eyewitness. John is actually in heaven at this point, seeing these things in the first person. This is not necessarily, he's not seeing a vision now. John's there. He's privileged to see from this vantage point. And he sees a scroll in the right hand, or a book, the King James Version says, in the right hand of him who sat on the throne, which was sealed with 7 seals. Now, the scroll is the title deed to planet Earth. This deed doesn't describe what Christ will inherit, but rather how he will regain his rightful inheritance. So let me switch around here just a minute. I want to read you something out of one of my books. So hang on just a second. I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. And I want to read a little bit of a passage out of this book written by Skip Heitzig from Calvary, Albuquerque. Skip has written a book. You can understand the book of Revelation. And he says here, in the Old Testament days, something called the redemption clause allowed a former owner to buy back his land. Everybody remembers the book of Ruth, right? So here is the book of Ruth. Although it's about Ruth, it was also, again, a picture of Christ. So the land, a former owner could buy back the land. The land could never be sold permanently. So if someone had lost a piece of land but later could fulfill the requirements to buy it back, he had the authority to so Jesus was this. He had the authority to take the scroll and break its seals and read the words inside. So when we look at chapter 5 there, we see this concern. There's this genuine concern among all who were present at this time. They see this scroll, and there's some kind of significance. They understand the throne. The attendees at this point in chapter 5 understand the significance of the throne, what they're seeing, what's going on, the happenings, the lampstands of fire, the presence of Jesus, and this scroll or this book in the right hand of the one who sat on the throne, who was God. And there's just obvious significance about what it is. So let me read verse 2 there. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy," page turn, "to open the book and to loose the seals thereof?" So there's kind of like, it almost reminds me like Goliath coming out and challenging, is anybody worthy to fight me? And there's just silence. Everybody's like, not me. I'm not it. It's almost, I almost get that picture there. So who is worthy to open this book that we see something hugely significant here, apparently? So who is worthy to open a book? And John says in verse 3, "And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much because no man was found worthy to open the book and to read the book, neither to look thereon." So let me skip back to Skip's book here. He says, we know the scroll in Revelation chapter 5 is highly significant. First, we see it in God's right hand, which in the Bible is the hand of authority. Second, it appears to involve the fate of the whole earth. Reference verses 3 and 4 there. That is why observers weep and wail when no one is found worthy to open the scroll. When someone finally comes forward who is worthy to take and break the seals, exuberant worship breaks out, and we'll see that there in verse 8. It seems then that this scroll is nothing less than the title deed to the earth that God created, the earth that God sustains and maintains, but it is also the earth that God must reclaim by redemption. And so the Lamb steps forward to fulfill these obligations. The idea is here that I can redeem or reclaim this land that was lost. So in sticking with what God always does, he's acting here as a kinsman redeemer because he has the authority to take it back. Let me go on. Someone might object, but if God is the creator and the maintainer of the earth, then why does he need to reclaim what's already his? After all, doesn't the Bible say the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof? But remember this, God gave Adam dominion over the earth, and when Adam fell into sin, the earth came under a divine curse, and it will remain under that curse until time arrives for God to remove it. In the garden, Adam gave dominion over the earth to Satan. That makes Satan, or the devil, a usurper. The earth is not his, but what he was able to do, he doesn't own the earth, but the New Testament does give Satan the title, the God of this age. So note this, that when the devil tempted Jesus, he showed the Lord all the kingdoms of the earth in a moment of time and said, all this authority I'll give to you. And he could actually done that. He had the authority over it he had the authority to have done that. And I'll give all this to you and the glory because it's all been delivered to me and I can give it to whomever I wish. Therefore, if you'll worship me, all will be yours. Satan apparently knew that Jesus had come to shed his blood to buy people back to God. And he tried to convince the Lord that he didn't have to go to the cross. Of course, Jesus spurned that temptation and he did go to the cross and he did shed his blood for our redemption. So, it's interesting to see now that this title deed, which man essentially gave away at for nothing. The same way that it was lost, God, by the same methods, reclaims these things. And that's what's amazing, that God doesn't reach over and mash the easy button and kind of shortcut some things or go around. That's how we might handle a problem. We might look for the quick solution. But it's amazing right here that God has been that patient, that after thousands of years of time, he's allowed good things to happen to bad people, bad things to happen to good people, wars to be fought, people to be, killed, good people dying, bad people going on, all this up and down. Why God? Why God? Why God? Why God? God has a plan. And it all works together. And that's the thing for a lot of immature believers, or believers that refuse to mature, or believers that never do mature. Let me say it like that. Because they get stumped on little things like that. Why did God take my daddy? Why did God take this? Rather than understanding that this earth is not my home in this sense anyway. The future that I have a hope and a future and a promise of something that's greater than this anyhow. So the only thing is their race, I now understand their race is complete. I need to finish mine. That should be an encouragement to us, So anyway. All right, so the scroll. Let me get back to over here on this side. I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but when I read this stuff, I'm like, yes, I need to say that. Yes, I need to say that. Okay, so, yes, let me go back here right quick. Well, really, I could read that whole chapter of that. Let me get back over here. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay. The scroll is a scroll of doom and judgment. It's also a scroll of redemption, and it tells how Christ will redeem the world from Satan and his horde. So you're sitting there, you're thinking, well, what's in the scroll? Well, we're going to find out what's in the scroll when we turn to chapter 6 and 7. We'll see, or chapter 6 going into chapter 7 and 8, we'll see actually what's in the scroll. Ezekiel described in chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, the same scroll in his vision of heaven. He says, or John said again, and I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and loose the seals thereof. So the call went out to every corner of the universe. This is just a clarion call to everyone who is worthy to open the book. This causes John to weep uncontrollably, and it's the only time that we see in Scripture that there's tears seen in heaven. I did not know that until I had read that. It's interesting, I thought. John's weeping was sincere, but God was about to take action. John wanted to see a world without evil, sin, and death, and he wanted to see God's kingdom established on earth, and the search for the worthy one to open the scroll was about to end. So, here we are. Now let's get to verse 5. And one of the elders said unto me, don't weep, or weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the book and loose the 7 seals thereof. Verse 6, and I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne. So there we are. John was told to stop weeping. His attention was drawn to a new person emerging on the scene. So apparently he was, I'm not, at one point John doesn't see him, and then all of a sudden his attention is directed, and now he sees Jesus. Now, let me pause there for just a second. When we read something like this, it almost seems like I'm just reading a story. To be honest with you, it seems like when I read something like this, I have to stop the wheels and the gears in my brain turning and say, this is real. I'm not reading a fictional narrative that some author has created that's an exciting story. So I want to encourage all of us right now to stop and tell yourself, we're being granted, again, that mysterion, that revealing, that mystery is being revealed right now. And we're being granted insight into the goings-on into heaven. And not just heaven, but right around the throne, central to heaven. Okay, we're not talking about just the streets of gold or something like. I imagine that would almost be a sideshow, if you will. But we're talking about being given insight into the throne room, the very happenings around the throne of God, Him sitting there, in all His glory and splendor that human words fail time and again to communicate the beauty of what that must be. So as we read these words tonight, I just want to encourage us again to say, okay, I'm not reading a fictional narrative here. I'm reading truth. And like I said, it's easy to make that mistake. So John recognized this person emerging on the scene, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. No human or angel can redeem the entire universe, but we know now that Jesus Christ can. Those that say Jesus is not coming back, or this is not happening, or this is not, it flies in the face of the plan of God, and it's why it behooves us to understand what God has designed as the end game, if you will, of His entire plan. You know, it's like I mentioned last week. Nobody would go to the latest hit movie and then 3/4 into the movie said, you know, I'm done. Right before the climax begins, you know. We waited through 2 hours of movie to get to the climax, and then we're going to leave. So we understand that God does have an end plan that's purposed in His plan as well. So here again we see the reference to the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which comes from Genesis chapter 49, verses 8 and 10. Out of the lion-like tribe of Judah would come a strong, fierce, and deadly ruler. This was how the Jews expected to identify Christ when He came the first time. But because that's what they were looking for when Jesus came the first time, they rejected Him. And they wanted a liberator to deliver them from Roman rule, and then because of that, they missed Him. Now, those same people, if they want to see the Jesus Christ that's here, He's coming. He's one of these days, very soon He's coming again, and this is how He's coming. The Root of David is a reference to a title that was derived from Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 and verse 10. And Matthew and Luke tell us that Jesus was a descendant from David on both his father and his mother's side. So Romans 1, verse 3, Paul said that Jesus was born of a descendant of David according to the flesh. So Son of Man, Son of God. We understand that. Jesus is the one who is worthy to take the scroll because of who He is. He is the rightful king from David's descendants and what He is. He is the lion from the tribe of Judah with the power to destroy His enemies. It's important to understand now, all of heaven's looking for somebody to open this scroll. Where's He at? Where's He at? All of a sudden, you know, boom, He's on the scene. He's recognized. There He is, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. Okay, so there all of a sudden is two titles given to indicate His descendancy, or how he came on the scene through the bloodline, and then the power established in His name, from the lion-like tribe of Judah. So now we're understanding. We're not seeing just it's a lot of times people get this image of Jesus, the love maker. You know, we get in Song of Solomon and we see Him as the one who loves and all that. And we see Jesus as the healer, you know, the one who's going to fix me, fix my brokenness. Jesus as the one who comforts in my time of loss or in my time of need. Here it's going to be Jesus, basically the reconciler. He's coming back and He's going to reconcile back to Himself what was usurped by the enemy. And it's not going to be a very pretty thing. John's eyes were drawn to what he saw between the throne with the four living creatures and the elders. So let's look at verse 8. And when He had taken the book, the four beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are prayers of the saints. And that's what that represents is just the prayers of the saints. Those vials or bowls full of going up as incense, and we've heard that referenced time and again. And then for all those people that said, there's no music, and we don't worship the Lord with music, and maybe getting myself in trouble here, but there's entire denominations that stand against that. Plenty of music going on in heaven, plenty of instruments there in heaven, and I don't say that to incite anybody. I just want to make that very clear. Also, they're looking at verse 8, harps and golden vials full of odors. And they sang a new song. So there's again music in heaven. And they sang or sung a new song. Sing, sang, sung. Okay, and they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain, and thou hast redeemed us to God by thy blood, and out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. And when I read this, I was like, man, we need to write a worship song that says this. But then I got to thinking, I was like, well, the worship song's already been written. It's going to be sung, and I don't even know the tune to it. I'll have to wait till I get there. So I won't break any copyright laws here on earth before we get there. But isn't it remarkable, though, the significance of singing to suggest that we recognize, and singing is just another method by which humanity is able to voice its recognition and awareness of a holy God. Oftentimes, I'll tell a quick story on myself. Back when I first became a Christian, there was the shift in the 90s from praise and from hymnal music to praise and worship music, and that was a big contentious point in the churches, especially because we're the last to do anything where we're at. We're kind of like on the tail end, and then we act like it's the new thing. Really, they've been doing it out west forever. California, that's the place you ought to be. So, but anyway, thinking about looking back, on what a big deal that was, and you always felt like you had to choose sides, whether you were part of the hymnal crowd or the worship crowd, and I remember this very exuberant lady coming to our church at the time, and just insisting that's what we needed to be doing, and I just remember having these mixed feelings about, I want to be right. I've always been that guy. Just show me what's the right way. Show me what right looks like, and I want to do that, and I'm good with that. But don't switch gears on me midstream, and then But so I remember then that struggle, and time and getting a little older and studying has taught me. It's just like we were in worship the other day. Just understand there's hymns and psalms and spiritual songs. There's a variation, that can't just be bottled up into one avenue or one way that we worship the Lord. Our obedience is worship, so worship the Lord in spirit and in truth, the Bible says. So we try to paint it in, that it must be this way because this is the way that I think, therefore I'm going to convert everybody to my opinion. And I learned through that there's going to be people who've gone as far as they're going to go. They've drawn the line in the sand. But it's interesting when you get over here and you look and you see what real worship looks like. Now, we've had some times in worship in our church that I would just say is just really close to the throne room of heaven. Just some really good times when it's just great. But when we look at chapters 4 and 5, we see biblical worship taking place, being modeled. Not just what it is, worship the Lord in spirit and truth, but we see it actually being modeled and happening in time. We see that. And it's our heavenly example of what it's like for us to worship. So when he taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders, and we talked about who they were last week, they fell down before the Lamb. And every one of those had instruments. They had harps, and then their golden vials full of prayers. And they sang a new song, and I want to read this again. I know I did, but let me read it again. Saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. These people were privileged to be in the audience of heaven on this day and this given time. Not only are they privileged to be there, but they recognize why they are able to be part of that number. And that's amazing to me that in all the 21st century, all the knowledge that we have, all the understanding that we have, that the gospel again is right here. Jesus Christ, slain, crucified, redeemed us by his blood. There's the gospel again right there. So when we think as a church or as Christians that we've outgrown the gospel, we have to remind ourselves that it still is what it is, and it's still that method that saves humanity today. It's the blood of Jesus Christ. You know, we must never depart from that as the church, not just this local body, but as the church, we must never depart from that understanding. You know, we can go down a lot of avenues, we can expand, you know, and grow in a lot of different ways, but that is the core fundamental truth of why I'm even able to participate in this thing called Christianity. Why I'm able to even be a believer in Jesus Christ. Okay, so continuing on, this praise song says, and has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. There it is. There it is. We're going to be given positions to reign in this earth. And it's one of those things that what will that look like? When will that take place? I don't understand it. You know, find me somebody that really does. You know, we can you know, have a scientific's the wrong word to use in this setting, but a scientific studied approach, let me say that, and try to figure out what that may look like, how that may all come about. But the fact still remains that we, here in verse 10, he has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. Kings and priests, that's who we are. Although we don't realize that yet. That's who we are. Let me move on now. I got real froggy with my keynote presentation, and I think I blew it up. Because somehow or another I jumped around, and I blew it up. But that's okay. I don't need this stupid computer. Yeah, I'll just throw that thing across the room. What did I do? Well, to prove it to you, I don't need that. Yeah. Where's my rag now? I need a rag to wipe the sweat. And that ain't sweats of glory, that's sweats of nervousness. Oh, no. All right. So, I'm about done anyway, so that's sooner than later, yeah. Yeah. All right. Amen. All right. So let me go on. John says, and I beheld and heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beast and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. This number here, it's an enumeration, or it's the inability to enumerate or place a specific number on the swarm of people that John saw there. We're talking about Christians from all ages, the redeemed from all ages by the blood of Jesus Christ, gathered in that location, miraculously, supernaturally, however you want to imagine that. You want to talk about a worship service. And nobody's going to be mad about the carpet or the color of the chairs or what the preacher said or what version of the Bible he's preaching out of. We're all going to be right there in just wrapped up in the glory and the goodness of a holy God. Yes, in unity. Nevertheless, in unity. Because we sing a new song together there, and it gives us what we're singing. Thou art worthy. So there's going to be this miraculous unity among all of the redeemed right there. Saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth, such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, heard I saying, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever. And the four beasts said, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him that lived forever and ever. So I get this picture, and we'll stop there with the end of chapter 5. But I get this picture, the elders, you just get this, it's like they raise up, and it's time, man, they're just overcome again with this sense of worship, and they're bowed back down before the throne yet again. So if you could sum up chapter 5, it's in a couple of points. First of all, who is worthy? First of all, there's a scroll in the right hand of God. Second of all, who is worthy to open that scroll? It's Jesus Christ. Third of all, once that's been discovered and realized in that moment, it's then understood that he's worthy to open that, and an unimaginable time of worship takes place that begins now. Now we know, it's kind of like right now, I know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I know this stuff, and right now, this side of heaven, I'm walking by faith. Because remember what he told Thomas when he came back after his resurrection? He said, blessed are you, Thomas, that you've seen now the scars in my hand. But blessed are those that have not seen and will believe, and yet believe. That's us. We're in that number of people. So when I think about Revelation chapter 5 worship services as compared to now, I'm thinking, yeah. Now, it's not just with eyes of faith am I seeing. My faith and my senses are now experiencing the fullness of God in that. And I cannot imagine the overwhelming emotion, just being overcome with the realization, man, this is him. This is him. This is Jesus Christ. This is who I got up Sunday mornings for. This is who saved me from whatever. I had a preacher one time, he said, God saved me from $1,000 a day cocaine habit. He said, God saved me from 3 prostitutes a week. He said, God saved me from beating my wife every time I thought she needed it. Because he saved me when I was 5 years old. And I was like, boom. You know who it is, Ronnie. But it always blessed me. But we see Jesus as that. But then, future, we will be there witnessing that with unspeakable. I don't know that we'll have that old jaw hit the floor kind of thing, the old Isaiah chapter 6 kind of thing, take a coal, cleanse my lips, that kind of thing. The priest can't stand to minister. Those kind of, that immediately rushes my mind about what worship in heaven will look like. So that's Revelation chapter 4 and 5. So quick summary. Chapter 4 verse 1, John said, after these things, immediately after this. And then Jesus told John, so John was taken to heaven. Immediately after the church age, John was taken to heaven. The church was no longer mentioned from being mentioned 19 times in the first 3 chapters, no longer mentioned again until chapter 19. All right, so the church, chapter 4, verse 1, we see, is in heaven now. Then John says he heard a voice behind him and turned and saw. He says, let me show you the things which must take place after these things, immediately after this. So we've got 2 events: rapture taking place in chapter 4, and then it's being revealed to John what must take place. So John gave us kind of like a quick rundown, a quick 10-cent tour of what he saw in heaven. He's talking about the furniture that he saw, the people that he saw, the beasts that he saw in chapter 4. And then we understand he saw the throne in chapter 4. And then in chapter 5 he sees the throne and one who sat on the throne with a scroll in his right hand. And then there's this search for who is worthy to open the scroll. All right, and then it was discovered. There he is. There he is. It's kind of like waiting on. Have you ever been to a concert and you saw the warm-up band, and everybody's like, well, them guys was pretty good. And then the real guys came out. You're like, oh, yeah, that's why I paid $30 to come out here. These guys were great. That's what it's going to be. Yes, it's kind of like, man, this was good, but this is better. So there he is. There he is. And but it all kind of gets pretty bleak for planet Earth when Jesus opens that first seal. Yeah. Out of those 7, there's 7 seals on that scroll. So we'll bait you up for next week. We'll come back and you can read chapter 6, and as he opens that, you'll see it tells you exactly. It's right there listed, one right after the other. So next week, if you guys will, in your book, if you have time, go ahead and cover chapter 6 and 7. So that's what I'll try. I'll try to go through chapter 6 and 7. Else we're going to be here till Jesus comes back.